Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors webinar series on market entry into China. Have you conducted a market research study or focus study group on your industry sector in China? Do you know the importance and value that a study can be for your China journey? Are you looking to enter China without setting up a company? Are you familiar with the benefits of having a representative office? Are you familiar with how to set up a limited company in China? Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is offering this series of complimentary webinars on all of these subjects. And hopefully by the end of this webinar series, we will have provided you with information and tools to enrich your China business skills and enhance your market entry efforts to achieve success within the Chinese market. In today's session, we will be looking at ways to do business in China without setting up an entity. I just want to mention here, I've received the largest amount of registrants for this webinar session, which just probably goes to show how many companies are interested in going into China, first of all, and how many are actually looking to go in China with probably the least amount of commitment to the market. Now, what I'm going to be going through in today's webinar session is really not rocket science. I'm not revealing to you the gold ticket of how to do business in China. It's all pretty much common sense information. But I just want to mention that because I did find it quite interesting that this topic in particular generated so much resonance and feedback from people and from companies in terms of going into China. Now, let's just start first with a couple of admin slides. First of all, when you joined the GoToWebinar session, you have a control panel that's up on your screen. You have the option of choosing your audio selection, whether it's your computer audio or a landline. Generally, the stability and clear voice comes through the landline versus the computer audio, but it's up to you whichever option you would like to choose. For those of you that are in jurisdictions that have firewalls in place by the government, you may be required to utilize a VPN. I know that this is the case definitely in the Middle East as well as in China. So just note, by being on a VPN, you might have a better connection and better stability during this webinar session. Now, any fault can occur during a webinar session. It does take about 30 seconds to 45 seconds for the system to reboot. So please don't leave. I will be coming back to finish the session. If you do want to choose the telephone option or landline option, then just click on telephone within the audio section of your control panel, and a number for your jurisdiction should actually pop up with an access code and an audio pin. We will have a Q&A about 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the end of today's session. So please don't be shy. Add your comments, your questions into the question section of the control panel. As highlighted, this is a complimentary session. Take it to your advantage. Ask what you would like. I might not be able to get back to you straight away, but I will certainly get back to you by early next week. Now, just to test the system, if you would be so kind as to click on the hand button in your control panel, this will just give me a sense that you can hear me. Thank you very much. And if you could then re-click it, it will disappear from your system. So let's begin with today's session. The title is 6 Ways to Do Business in China Without Setting Up an Office or an Entity. And there are typically many ways to do business in other countries besides your home jurisdiction. Some are obviously easier than others. And though there are certain approaches, there's also depends on the types of rewards you're going to gain. And with any way that you decide to choose, it will involve probably a higher or lesser risk or a higher or lesser cost. But the key point is, when you are going into the Chinese market, you've got to know what options are available at your fingertips. So that's the point of today's presentation, because I do meet a lot of companies that want to go into China, but they're not yet ready to commit to the market. There's still a lot of physical testing that they want to do in terms of sales and in terms of employment, and they want to understand how they have the ability to do that. There are a couple of new phases, so just very quickly, let me introduce Woodburn. Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is specialized in inbound investment into China and Hong Kong. What we do is we establish, manage, and administer companies in both those jurisdictions. We offer services, everything from the whole China journey, actually, the pre-investment advisory, the market entry advisory, implementation, cross-border investment, tax optimization, corporate restructuring, M&A, etc. Our clients are all international companies focused on inbound entry into Asia. Obviously, our expertise is around the two markets of China and Hong Kong, but we do have clients that go into other Asian jurisdictions as well. And the strategy for many of our clients is a mixture of one of these items, which can be manufacturing in China, exporting to China, exporting from China, and offering a variety of after-sales services or services within the Chinese market. Again, this presentation is a general overview. I'm offering 6 insights, 6 options into how to do business in China. Maybe only one of those options is applicable to you because of the industry and the sector that you're in. So if you do have specific questions, then don't hesitate to reach out. To put a face to the voice, my name is Christina Kohler-Coluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I've been in this industry of corporate services since 2003, only dealing with the Chinese and the Hong Kong market. I dabbled into the Singapore market as well, but Woodburn isn't offering services in that jurisdiction. All of my clients are international companies coming really from the main economies of the world, the US, Canada, European Union, Australia, and all of them are looking to do some form of business locally in the Chinese market. So I have a very lengthy agenda. Don't get frightened by it, but let's get started with an introduction. And I love my very first sentence that I put up here. A lot of companies I meet think it's very sexy to open an office abroad, particularly in a jurisdiction like China, where it's so far away. And what I mean by sexy is they think that it brings up their image, particularly if they're looking to sell their organization, or they're looking for further investors. It is sexy to say you've got a Chinese office, but obviously costs can be prohibitive. Now, the key thing is understanding that you can have a presence in China without necessarily having an office, a physical office, a room with 4 walls that has your company name on it. There are many other ways that you can show that you're doing business in the Chinese market. And obviously all the options, are a variety depending on cost, depending on commitment, depending on investment, depending on resources. But all of the options that I want to show you today are ways for you to test out the Chinese market beyond the market research stage. So yesterday we were talking a lot about the importance of doing a market research study, and I highlighted a variety of different types of studies that you can do and that hopefully should be done at some point within the China journey. Today, the whole point of today's session is to say, well, I've done my market research study. Now let's experiment. Let's do a field trial. Let's test it out. But obviously without making the commitment and the investment in capital to set up an entity. Now, one of the things that I want to highlight is it is right now, from my perspective, and everyone has a different opinion on this, but for me, the hardest thing that I see where things are getting more stringent and tougher is for foreigners in China to get visas. So if your whole strategy right now is to say, I'm going to expatriate people or I'm only going to hire foreigners, you might want to put a question mark around that just because the visa process is extremely difficult. So that shouldn't be, though, an item that halts your expansion, okay? You might want to, at some point, localize your business. My philosophy is this. I have been doing business in China for 15 years, specifically in Shanghai, and I'm not a full expert of the Chinese market. Do you know who is the expert? It's the Chinese that were born and raised and are sitting in China and have never left China. They are the experts. They are the ones who know how to develop the business. They are the ones who develop the partnerships and relationships. They are the ones who can give you the ideas on how to build up your business and move your business forward and make it successful. That is something that I truly believe in. It's happened with my own businesses. And, you know, I might know as much, I can read as much as I like, but I'm still not the expert like the Chinese are the experts. So we're going to look also at today's presentation in terms of how you can garner these relationships, how you can do your due diligences, and how you can also protect yourself, because in the long term, what you want to do is garner relationships where you have loyalty and trust. And obviously being so far away, that is a big issue for many people that are going into the market. But I want to start off with today's presentation, besides the introduction, into looking at what your goals are. Now you've done your market research studies, you know, what are your goals by testing the market, by doing actual field trials or experiments? Well, probably you want to do either one of these two things or both. One is you want to hire somebody on the ground, but you don't want to have a vehicle to hire this person through. So one of the things you have to keep in mind, if you want to hire a mainland Chinese employee that's residing in mainland China, they must pay income tax as well as social insurance. And they must be registered with the local labor bureau. Now, a lot of people use freelance agreements. I would be very weary of freelance agreements because there is no great black and white law regarding freelance agreements. So it is a sketchy type of strategy to take. And obviously, if you're looking to hire foreign employees, the biggest component there is the visa. So in that case, they have to be sponsored by a local entity in China. So if you're looking to hire an employee without committing to an actual vehicle in China, then utilize a company in China that can hire these people on your behalf. And we'll be looking at the options later on. The second goal is probably, particularly if you're looking to do some form of sales in the Chinese market, even if you're looking to manufacture, is that you have to issue a fapiao. Now in China, you can't just issue a standard Word document, Excel document invoice. You need to be able to issue a Chinese invoice, which is called a fapiao. Here's a photo for you, that is purchased from the tax bureau and that most of your clients may request you to issue. Now, if you're in the service sector and you are providing companies with a service in China, try to use an invoicing agent to help you. If you're trading, then you've got to use an intermediary agent to help you. Okay, but there are options for you available to do local invoicing, particularly if your customer is requesting this from you. So that's probably what your two goals are. So why don't we look now at the 6 options that are available to you. So the first option is direct sales. This basically means you're not using any intermediary. You are doing everything yourself from your home jurisdiction. Now, probably your question is, well, how do we find the clients? How do we do all of that? Well, very simply, the first avenue would be trade shows. So you participate in trade shows in China where you can meet clients, where you can probably meet intermediaries, but then you start off any form of sales or activity from your home jurisdiction. So if you're doing e-commerce, you know, kind of B2C work, if you're doing e-commerce, you would have your own website. You might want to get your own .cn domain name. You might have a mobile app. If you're doing digital sales, you might want to go through one of the platforms. And for example, you can use Tmall Global, which is a platform that's based and served out of Hong Kong. So there are options in terms of B2C, and in terms of B2B, it's basically, you know, the customers are generated through trade shows, through networks, through referrals. and the actual business is direct from your home jurisdiction to the customers directly in China. Product and potentially service are just going either way. Now, with direct sales, there are issues, particularly if you are in the service sector, with the main point being that many Chinese customers will have issues to transfer renminbi overseas or foreign currency overseas. So be wary of that as a hurdle or obstacle that might come up along your China journey that might then bring you on to the next step. Then you might say, well, what about using a sales representative or a sales agent? And obviously, this is a great way to start developing an international presence in China with somebody that has the actual expertise in your industry or in your sector. And sales reps or sales agents, they generally should be able to help you to open the doors, especially if you are an unknown brand. You will know if you're an unknown brand if you've done a brand awareness study, okay? And obviously, if the result of that is that you are an unknown brand, then you will need a sales rep or an agent to try and promote your brand. So the sales rep in China can set up research to test your product, get feedback about your product or service before obviously investing heavily. The issue with sales reps and sales agents is they generally don't take any risks, meaning they won't purchase product from you. They will just be an intermediary agent facilitating the sales, okay? And this is the same for export. You'll have trading agents who will facilitate finding new suppliers in the market, etc. But from a sales perspective, they're not going to take any form of risk. But you have these options of sales reps and sales agents. The next option, and I get this question a lot, is about using a professional employment organization firm, a PEO. Now, PEOs in China, this is very interesting because there is no black and white regulation specifically about the term PEO. What does exist in China are firms like FESCO, which is the Foreign Enterprise Service Company. You also have Zhongzhi, you have China HR, you have a bunch of other, what I call labor dispatch agency firms, whereby they can hire people as an intermediary. Now, the downside of utilizing FESCO service or any of these other firms' service is the fact that the labor law has become more and more strict over time. And as a consequence, many of these PEO firms or labor dispatch firms are refusing to hire people in this method. So it is important, if you want to use what is the legal term of a PEO firm, then check with them first whether they're willing to offer you the service, because I do know that many aren't willing to offer it. So just be aware of that. Now, besides the PEO firm, you then have consulting companies, chambers of commerce, business associations that offer what I call an incubation service or launchpad service, where they hire people on your behalf through their own service agreements. It's not a PEO relationship. I mean, we can't dictate it in China as a PEO relationship, but it's basically a type of service agreement where we are offering the service of hiring somebody who will work solely for your organization. The contract terminology and form is a little bit different than a PEO contract, is basically what I'm trying to say. So you can obviously first go with a PEO firm like FESCO. I call them labor dispatch companies, or you can work with a chamber of commerce, consulting company, business association that might offer this incubation service on your behalf. Now, the whole point of this and the advantage of this is that you get somebody on the ground. is that you get an individual on the ground that you have recruited. You can also use recruitment firms to find them, that you are then employing through a legal entity that is registered in China, that you are sure that this legal entity is going to be paying the social insurances, the income tax, the net salaries, maybe even doing reimbursement of expenses, and that this person is, properly employed, is legally employed in the market, meaning you can sleep much better at night knowing that there is no gray area in terms of this relationship. Having someone on the ground, as I highlighted in yesterday's webinar session, for me, nothing beats that. Primarily because China is such a huge market and a lot of it is still done, a lot of business is still done face-to-face. The Chinese like to see you. They want to see somebody that is representing your firm, that is with your firm, that knows your firm hands down, versus hiring a sales rep that has, a name card that's different from your company name, for example. So these are just small cultural issues that you need to be aware of. The next is obviously utilizing distributors. And obviously the relationship with a distributor is much deeper because typically distributors will purchase your product, warehouse it, ship it, market, sell your product, etc. They do the full logistical circle around your product or your service. And obviously they take on more risk. They'll ask for probably a larger share of the revenue and some sort of risk mitigation for returns and marketing costs. Obviously, great distributors need to be well capitalized. They have to be trustworthy. They have to have a good sales and marketing network in order to be a fruitful partner. Now, I have a huge tip here, and this is the same also with sales agents. It's the fact that you probably should not put all your eggs in one basket. Spread your wings and use multiple distributors. China is a huge territory. It's impossible for one distributor to be able to attack the entire market. And if that's your goal, if your goal is to attack the entire market, one distributor can't. In addition to that, over time, distributors might get lazy. You want to be able to use other people if you have the opportunity. So definitely you want to have exit strategies within your distribution agreements to make sure that you can exit at any time or have the opportunity and flexibility to find additional distributors or, as in the other case, agents. Licensing is another form. Now, probably we're already on that item number 5, and probably what you have noticed, if you haven't noticed, is that I have put this in the order of greater risk, greater resources needed to help you understand, what's the easiest solution all the way to probably what's the more complicated solution. Now, licensing is absolutely another option. It's a great way to do business in countries or markets where you don't have a plan to physically expand into. And licensing relationships can obviously be very lucrative in the long run. When you license your product, your name, your program, your software, your IP, your design, your technology, you typically have much less control about how the other company ultimately does business with it, which is why this is a greater risk in terms of the business. But there's obviously a lot of training that has to be involved in it, and you need to have a superb lawyer that is backing you up with your licensing agreement to make sure that you are completely protected. Obviously, some areas and problems that I've seen over time is that licensing fees are never paid, which can be an issue, particularly if you yourself never follow up. So there has to be some form of commitment to the market where the relationships with any of these partners that you're working with is stable and is maintained continuously. Not that you sign a licensing agreement today and you don't follow up for a year. Nothing is going to come into fruition with that. Now, obviously, I want to always stay on the positives of everything, but let's face it, the media also projects a lot of the negatives that occur in China. So the goal is obviously to explain to you with each of these options the pros and cons. But obviously, licensing is a way for you not to invest in the market, particularly if you're in a sector that is probably highly difficult to get into, meaning it's a niche market where there's just a few select, maybe distributors or licensees that are there that, are catering to that business. But, one of the things that I've seen is people meet one person, they get to know them after a dinner, maybe even a breakfast or a lunch. Within a couple of months, they've signed an agreement, whether that's a distribution agreement or a licensing agreement. And then nothing is brought into fruition. Goals aren't being kept as indicated in the agreements, but there's also no follow-up being done by the company. No visits are being made, etc. Which is probably why many companies are also looking at a combined solution of having somebody on the ground through either a PEO firm or, like I said, a consulting firm or business association. And they are then controlling the distributors, the licensees, or the franchisors. So another option, particularly if you are a brand, is maybe you want to franchise into the Chinese market. And obviously, franchising allows a company to buy into an existing and successful business model, a brand name, an operations, a marketing. These are all kind of recipes for success to developing the brand. Obviously, there are tweaks that have to be made in order to fit to the Chinese market, but you are actually ultimately franchising to an individual that will maintain the brand image, probably maintain the operations to a certain extent, maintain marketing goals and marketing initiatives as well, and hopefully them being successful in the market. Now, the advantage of this is that the franchisee in China is basically has the option to also expand and not just stay in one location. So they obviously have the ability to grow. The key thing with franchising, once again, is the fact that you have to pay attention to the franchisee, that they keep within all the agreement terms and conditions and guidelines, okay? In theory, with franchising, you do have a lot more control over your brand because you should be paying attention to it. Now, with any of these options, you need partners. Okay, besides option one, where you're basically doing everything direct from your home jurisdiction, all other 5 require you to find a partner and work with a partner. Now, beware of partners. And people always say, well, this is so true of China. It's so true anywhere in the world. Whomever you're going to partner with, whether it's somebody in the UK, somebody in the US, anybody can cheat you, okay? It's not just in China. Cheating occurs all over the world. Scamming occurs all over the world. So with whomever you want to work with, you do want to make sure you conduct a due diligence because scams are popular. There is a certain lack of transparency with partners, and obviously there's the cultural and language difference as well. So you do want to have a due diligence done on the partners that you're planning on working with. One of the things that you should definitely do, and it's very easy to do, is obviously check the company documents of your partners. Do they actually exist? Do they have a business license? Are they registered with the tax bureau? Do they have IP registrations? Do they have a lease agreement? Do they actually physically have an office? And you can also look at audit reports, financial documentation, etc. So you can do a background check on your partners to make sure that they are valid and true companies. Now, very simply, you can also do certain activities by yourself when you do your due diligence. The first is do an online search, both in English and Chinese. Use Google search engines, use a Bing search engine. Call the general fixed line several times, not just all on one day, but over a series of days. Are people continuously picking up? Check if the contacts that you have and who are representing the company or who say they are representing the company are physically working there, okay? Potentially ask for references. So talk to third parties that are working with these companies. Talk to other customers, suppliers, ask for a customer list, ask for a supplier list. Talk to people, okay? Everyone in China loves to talk back. Don't be shy. People will tell you. Ask for foreign references. If they're saying that they work with foreign brands or they've done business overseas, ask for these references. Check their address. Physically, go to it. Okay? Don't just sit in your home jurisdiction and don't come out to China. Physically go and visit that address. Do a spontaneous visit. You don't have to just call up ahead of time. Go and visit it spontaneously. Through an agent, a consulting firm, or a lawyer, you can also check the AIC file. AIC file is basically where you can obtain their business licenses and all of their registered certificates. Check their company chops to see if they are official and valid. Check the bank account information. So with a lot of export from China, so when you're dealing with suppliers in China, you will find very often that you're working with a production site. You visited it, it really exists. There's an assembly line, there are workers that are based there, but then comes the invoice and it's in an individual's name. Huh, why does that happen? Ask questions, be curious, make sure that you are protected and you know, anything where you feel uncomfortable or where your gut is telling you this is a bit funny, ask, follow up on it. Remember, lawyers, agents, consulting firms, trade associations, chambers of commerce, they can all help you with this. And obviously check, you know, the financial reports and the audits. There are plenty of signs of suspicion. Now, I'm kind of overgeneralizing here, but you know, you can use these as guidelines. But again, nothing beats actually visiting the firm. Number one, if it's all too good to be true. I truly do, that one I truly do believe. If it's all too good to be true, there's something a little bit funny going on behind it. If it's all too easy, be wary. I don't want to say that going into China is something that's complex and complicated. It used to be. When I first arrived in 2003, it was so much more complex and complicated than it is today. But if everything is going so smoothly, question it. You know, recheck documents, recheck transactions, go out and visit. Just to make sure that everything is legitimate. If the website is only English, for me, I find that always a little bit odd, primarily because if it's a Chinese company, they will generally have a Chinese website. Obviously, if they are 100% only working with foreign brands or foreign companies, could very well be that their site is also in English. I find it a bit strange, but could be. So it's just a matter of checking, you know? If they are pushing you all the time to go faster, to speed up, to sign, it means they're playing off of your patience. Never let someone push you so fast. Take your time, check things over. You know, we all know Westerners are impatient group of people, but be patient when you are doing business in China. Read things 2 to 3 times. If there's no verifiable track record, that is extremely suspicious. Obviously, if you cannot find out or if you can't figure out their customer base or you've done a background check, and obviously that comes out, that's definitely a sign. If there's no company email address, now in China, you know, this is kind of also changing because a lot of individuals and companies are using WeChat accounts, so more things are being businesses are being brokered more through WeChat than actually through emails. So this is slightly changing, but you do want to make sure there's some form of email. If the information does not add up, which basically means if your gut is telling you something is not right, that's a sign of suspicion, okay? If there's no production facilities, no license, no staff, because you've actually gone and visited them, okay, it means the company doesn't exist, and it's a person that is obviously trying to get money out of you. If they're offering you something that's considerably cheaper than market average price, okay, if the reason is because the product or the service is much lower quality, okay, it might make sense. But if the product and the service is of average to very high quality, then that doesn't make sense to me, as it wouldn't make sense anywhere else in the world. If your contact does not work for the company, that is also suspicious for me, because in the end of the day, he might give you his bank account information versus the company's. If the communication style or the contact person is constantly changing, that might also be a bit suspicious. And obviously, if they are requesting for any fees up front, right, that might also be a little bit suspicious. Be wary of that, or negotiate it and say we will pay 10% now and the remaining upon XYZ. So be aware of that. In addition, just some more things that I was thinking about last night. If the address is a residential address and not a commercial address, or if the address on the license is different from the physical address, that might also be a bit weird. If the company name is different than the company name on other items like the licenses or the bank account information, be wary of that as well. Now, the whole point of this webinar series is to bring you along a flow. So yesterday we talked about market research studies. Today we're talking about actually what can you do without setting up an entity on the ground, but doing field trials, experiments, or even just physically observing things that are going on in the market. You know, these are solutions for you. However, in your China journey, your business might grow, right? And there are certain trigger points that you should probably watch out for in order for you to understand if you want to exit these relationships and start doing things on your own, or not exit these relationships, but still have a proper presence, meaning an office, locally in China. I've listed here some of the trigger points that have come up, whether it's been for my own business or whether it's been for the businesses of my clients. One of them being the volume of business you've achieved, the value of business you've achieved. If customers are starting to ask you to issue fapiaos in your own company name because the relationship is developing and developing. If you're being asked by customers for actual local representation, meaning they want somebody from your organization with your name card that is sitting in an office in China versus talking to a sales agent, talking to a distributor, or using any one of these intermediaries. Or if you're being asked to stock inventory, obviously distributors can do that for you. You can also talk to 3PL organizations to stock inventory for you, but maybe it comes to a point where you want to have your own warehousing facilities to just do just-in-time deliveries. Do you need to increase your brand image? Do you need to start marketing locally and supervise the initiatives? Are you using third parties where there's more relationship building that has to occur? For example, with one of these intermediaries, the distributors, agents, licensees, franchisees, do you need to have somebody there representing you to supervise those relationships? Do you need a physical office space? Do you need a warehousing facility? These are all questions that might come up and might be trigger points for you in terms of then moving on to the next stage of your China journey. Now, obviously, there are a lot of advantages about incorporating a structure in China. And tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be looking at what it means to set up an actual representative office as well as a limited company, and what are the advantages and disadvantages surrounding those structures, and ultimately, how much commitment, resource, and capital do you have to put in those entities, right? But obviously, setting up a company in China, I think, you know, first things first, it shows a commitment to the Chinese market to anybody you're working with, whether that's going to be an investor, whether that's going to be a supplier, whether that's going to be a customer, whether it's any of the third-party organizations you work with. It just shows commitment. It increases your brand image as well as your profile, okay? The biggest advantages, though, are the first two goals that I highlighted in the presentation earlier, which is one, being able to hire people under your own company name. Now, you can hire someone through an intermediary. So one of the things I also want to highlight on this point is that you can use a PEO firm, you can use a consulting firm, you can use, you know, again, a business association, chamber of commerce. But I also have clients who have utilized their licensees. They've utilized their distributors to hire individuals on their behalf. Now, the downside of that solution is that it does give employees the sense that there's no direction with your company. And it doesn't provide too much stability. It doesn't really show a career progression unless you have excellent communication with them and you keep telling them what's about to happen, what's the next year going to bring, what's the next 2 to 3 years to bring. Unfortunately, not too many people are great with that form of communication just because of language or ultimately time zone issues. So incorporating structure obviously brings that in. It brings stability, secures people, and obviously strengthens loyalty and trust within individuals. The other one, which is the second goal I highlighted earlier, is the ability to issue FAPIAOs to your customers in your own company name, which is a key component. And obviously, ultimately, it puts full control of your organization within your own hands, okay? So you're not relying on the effort and time that a distributor, agent, or licensee is bringing in. You are doing it yourself. You are managing the business, you're controlling the business. When you are using any of these intermediaries, one of the things that you have to obviously watch out for is with any of the marketing tools or probably additional licenses they need to actually physically operate the business, sell your product or service, they will own. So, you know, having your own company, you have the ability to own this yourself. So again, I'm not here to try and sell you this. I'm just saying this is your China journey, right? So the first step is market research. Second step is saying, all right, let's test the market and see what we can do. What are our options in relations to using an intermediary or doing it direct? And then obviously the next part after that, if your business is growing, if you are successful, is to think about the trigger points and the advantages that it will bring you to have an entity yourself in China. So that's the end of today's presentation. There is one question that came in, a very good question actually, which is how do you find the partners? What's actually the best and most reliable method? Finding the partners is probably the trickiest thing. For me, the most logical first step about finding any of these partners would be at a trade show. So just because I talked to a food and bev company the other day, every year you have the SIAL trade show in Shanghai, whereby you will have all the food and beverage distributors and companies that are there to meet and see. So, you know, the first is really going to these trade shows, meeting people, going to the booths, introducing what you're doing, maybe even having your own booth to see what that might generate for you in terms of business. Then you can talk to your local chambers of commerce. What I am discovering, particularly in Germany as well as in the UK, and I believe in the US as well, is if you go to your local chamber of commerce, more and more frequently, they now have China desks. So you can talk to the China project manager at these desks to explain what you're looking to do and see whether they can be of any assistance to find you partners. The other is obviously using a market research company. I'm always weary with using market research companies because that's not their core business. Their core business is actually everything I highlighted yesterday, which is doing market segmentation, price benchmarking, competitor benchmarking, brand awareness studies, etc. It's not necessarily finding suppliers, finding customers, finding distributors, finding partners. Many of them do offer this service. However, the key thing when using a market research company is you need to be absolutely sure who and what you're looking for. Okay, you have to give them direction so that they know where to look. Then I guess the last point would be online tools. So obviously there's Alibaba, where you can find a lot of suppliers. I'm not really sure about finding partners and distributors, but definitely that could be a starting point. You can also look at the Hong Kong Trade Development Council website. There, I do know they have a great database of partners, licensees, distributors, suppliers, etc. There's a bunch of these online tools that you can look at, or databases to look at, where you do that desk research yourself. you know, getting an intern or finding someone who can find that information for you. So as I've been talking, nobody's really wrote any other questions, so I guess everything was very clear, or I hope it was clear. So we're going to end today's session there. Again, if you do have any specific questions about any of the options or information that I highlighted in today's session, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to talk to you and discuss it with you directly. If you are new to Woodburn's webinars, note that we have a bunch of different resources and a weekly campaign that goes out, but we're also on a variety of different social media platforms. Connect with me, connect with the company, so you can just follow on the free information. We have 3 more sessions in this webinar series. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at representative offices. Thursday we're going to be looking at setting up a business company. And on Friday I have a guest speaker, Ms. Ting Zhang from Crayfish, who's going to be looking at converting opportunities into sales. So if you haven't registered for those events and you would like to, please go to our website at woodburnglobal.com/events and you can register there. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me, and I hope to see you again very soon. Have a great afternoon and good evening. Thank you and goodbye.